Civilizations all started with hunter-gatherers roaming around following their food to survive. People were forced to follow their food for hundreds of years, collecting crops and killing animals. Once they found a large herd of animals, they tried to follow them in any direction the animals went for as long as possible. They followed the pattern of resources to live as hunter-gatherers. Resources tended to stay the same as they followed the same herd of animals. Trying to survive on simple wild plants that they could find and animals that they were chasing was difficult for them to get any food surplus. Getting food just for a day is hard enough for 5 or 6 people. To get extra food was very difficult. To get that extra food to stay fresh was truly impossible. To be a hunter-gatherer, you needed to be able to go out and touch your food, or go out and see your food eating grass in a field. Due to constantly moving around to follow food, people really didn't have many specialties. As time went on, people changed except for a few groups of people, such as New Guinea. In New Guinea, gender division is very noticeable. Women do the work of gathering the sago trees, while the men do the work of trying to farm. For the people of New Guinea, being hunter-gatherer is not a choice, it is the only option to survive. Due to their geographic location, the people of New Guinea will never be able to farm. They will always need to gather their food. People began to settle down due to an extreme drought, forcing them to stay in one place. They settled down in an area called the Fertile Crescent. There was tons of barley and wheat surrounding them in fields. They brought the food to them instead of going to the food. As the wild plant began to decrease in numbers, they began to replant the plant that was easier to harvest and larger that needed less water to grow. Without even knowing it, the people began to domesticate crops through pure preference of food. For once in history, people started to get surplus of crops, and due to the weather of the Fertile Crescent and the climate, people were able to store food. They stored foods in granaries under their homes to keep the crops cool and dry. The foods were able to stay there for months at a time without going bad, allowing people to have an excess surplus. The abundance of food allowed people's populations to increase in huge numbers. The more people there were in the groups, the more free time people had to enjoy and advance life. The free time people used to experiment with fire and the wheel that they had just recently discovered. They tried many different things with fire to see how exactly it works and how they could cooperate with fire to make something useful. Same with the wheel. The people tried different things to see how they could use this new thing to their advantage. They began to domesticate animals the same way they domesticated crops. They took in goats because they were simple animals and they were able to keep goats alive very easily with just grass. They used goats for many things, such as using their hair for clothes. They also used goats for milk, and they used the small amount of meat that they provided for food. Without even knowing it, the first people were feeding the animals the way that the 21st century people want. Over time, after using the fields for not only human needs, but for goats' needs as well, it was way more difficult to grow the crop that they had to survive. They began to enter environmental poverty. The state allocation of food needed to step in to make sure that all the people were getting an even amount of the dwindling crop. Much like the Women's March of Versailles, the crop that most wanted was gone and people were frantic to get it. Due to overuse of land, they had used up all of the nutritional soil by overplanting one crop for their own needs. They were forced to move from the comforts of the Fertile Crescent and move out latitudinal. As the people moved east and west from their original location, they took their cargo and technologies that were successful with them. Moving to new locations allowed the division of food to be spread around as they moved. As the population of people increased, people began to get more divided into smaller groups between the more successful people and the less successful people. As time went on, the division between people became more clear, and social classes were more noticeable as more technologies and more farming went about. People not only moved latitudinally, they also moved longitudinally after getting the technologies of the ship. Along with making swords from metals that they had perfected with fire and tools for farming, people were able to perfect the flotation of a boat. Now people were able to cross the vast seas that had once kept them in one place for so many years. Those newfound skills of farming, domestication of crops and animals, and tool making came in handy when people crossed the borders into unknown areas. Like as in the Aztecs and the conquistadors were so much more profitable than the Aztecs due to their geographic luck. They were able to conquer the Aztecs very easily because the Aztecs were so far behind with domestication and tools. Eventually, the idea of farming went to all countries that were environmentally able to farm. The Columbian Exchange was a big reason for mass-produced farming now. Food and cultures were combined and changed due to the foods that were coming in and out on the new ships from all around the world. Now, in the 21st century, the picture of farming has been blown up to extremely large proportions. The industrial farming is the largest industry in the world that, just like the hunter-gatherers were so many years ago. Farming was an epidemic. It was unstoppable, starting with the stressful hunter-gathering, going out and finding your food, to simple accidental domestication of crops that eventually moved around the world in a rapid pace. We were sustainable for hundreds of years. Why can't we change the industrial industry and become a sustainable system once again?